Hi, I'm going to share with you a few things I do to check tension, and I'm going to cover everything. So I'm not going to target specific problems, just in general, everything I can do to get good tension. I have a Word document I'm going to be following that I've created. If you want this Word document, you can message me on Facebook and give me your email address, and I will email this Word document to you. So first, to start out, and I also want to mention that these ideas aren't things I thought up. I would love to give everybody credit where credit is due, but I've read lots of internet posts about tension and what to do to take care of your machine. So none of this is unique to me. It's just things I've learned from other people. So one is to get a brand new paintbrush, and I'm getting ready to start another quilt, but I haven't cleaned from the last one, and you can see there's threads that gather. So it's so easy just to take this brush and just brush away all of the threads. So I do that, and then I'll do the same, and I'll rock my machine back and forth, and this just flicks away all of the dust and the little pieces of thread. Another thing that I do is I'll use the Whiteboard Cleaner, and this is one of the microfiber cloths, and I'll just spray this on there, and then I will clean every single wheel. There's a lot of wheels, so I clean these wheels. I'll clean on the encoder. I'll get down and I'll clean all of these wheels. Just every wheel I will clean using this cloth. I check the encoders and just make sure they snap back. There's one here, and then there's one down here. It's kind of hard to get to, but I'll make sure it snaps back. Then another thing I do, because these machines, as they're moving, especially using QCT, there's a lot of wear and tear there going back and forth. So I'll make sure everything that's plug-inable is still plugged in, especially this. I'll make sure that everywhere I see anything plugged in, and just plug in down here on this encoder, and all of this, I will make sure everything is totally plugged in. I've actually found, and I don't remember which one it was, this was back on the Q14 Plus I had, there was one time where one of these had actually come loose, and that surprised me. So that does happen. Another thing that is good to do if you have another person in your house is have someone stand up front and move the machine, like move it all the way up and down your rails, especially whatever the width of your quilt is. Just move it all the way up and down and back and forth, and then focus the person standing in the back. Just watch all of these cords and make sure something like, say, this isn't going to happen, because you don't want it to all of a sudden be able to catch. So make sure that your cords are not going to catch and they're all good. Okay, the next thing is to check your thread path. You want to make sure that you haven't missed anything, and where it goes through the posts, make sure that it's going in the right direction of each hole, whether the thread it's coming from the back and you have it coming from the back. Every little thing matters. So sometimes if I'm in a panic and I can't get things right, I will just check. I will pull out my manual and I will just check that I haven't missed anything, and like on that post, I'll make sure that yes, I do have the thread going in and out the right direction of the holes. That's very important. This mast up here, make sure that it is anchored down. There's a screw. You can tighten this up so it doesn't turn. But with the 21, this thread mast needs to be parallel to your machine. On the 14 Plus, this thread mast sits at the back, and it needs to be perpendicular to your machine. So make sure that this is riding correctly, and this needs to be setting right above your thread. So that's very important. One hole that tends to get missed is the one right above your needle. There's that little hole right there, so make sure that it hasn't been missed. And just track your thread and make sure it's just pulling smoothly And like I taped this piece of that portion of the wire there. It was wanting to get up against my thread and put tension that I didn't want on the thread. So I taped this so it wouldn't do that. Just make sure you have a nice smooth path for your thread and nothing is catching it anywhere. Where it goes through these discs, make sure that that thread is firmly going through the disc. And when you wrap it here, you know, floss it and pull it and make sure it is in between these two discs and it's firmly against that rod in there and not loose or caught on one of those discs, that it's fully flossed good. Another thing is to take off your needle plate. When you clean from here, you don't quite reach everything. So every now and then, especially if you've used some cotton thread that's real linty, take off this needle plate and clean underneath this needle plate. That's important. One thing you can do as far as cleaning between your disc is get some nice quality soft pipe cleaners. You don't want the dirt cheap craft kind. You want the nice soft ones. And you're able to just take this and pop it in there and clean it, and especially this one. You're able to just put that between there, and you can do that. And I've been surprised how much that this can pick up in between those discs. So you want to make sure that's clean. You want to clean out your bobbin case. Always keep that clean. So let me grab my brush here. So you'll take out your this and clean. This is a magnetic bobbin, so I have the spring removed, but you'll want to get that good and clean. This outer arm here, you'll want to clean under there. There's a variety of ways you can do it. You can use a little piece of cardstock and you can just gently run under there. You could also use a straight pin or a needle to get up and under there. You could even run a loop of thread under there. There's a little hook thing that goes in. You don't want to lift this out. You want to leave that hooked in there. So when you do your loop of thread, do it all the way, but then pull it and don't unhook that. But this is an area that there doesn't need to be any lint caught under. So get that really clean. And then between every two bobbin changes, you want to rotate your needle so that it's halfway down, and then you want to put 1 or 2 drops of oil right in there on that shaft. You can look in your manual and it shows you exactly how to do that. So with your needle halfway down, that's where you're going to put that 1 or 2 drops. So you want to keep your bobbin case oiled. And then when you put your bobbin case back in, you want to hear it click, so you'll know it's properly seated back in. Your thread that is wound onto a bobbin, you should feel the same firmness that you feel on a spool of thread. So if it's really spongy, then you don't have a very good wound bobbin. You'll need to rewound it and wind it tighter. And like I pointed out earlier, if you're using one of the magnetic pre-wound bobbins, the dark magnet side is going to go in first. But do remove the spring. And so if you use a lot of these, it's recommended that you get a second case and just leave that spring removed, so you're not going to wear out that spring taking it in and out. If you use the Magic Bobbin Genies, then you'll also remove the spring. And what I read a lot of people do is that's the little washer right there. They'll put a very tiny little drop of oil right in there, and then when they drop that washer in there, that holds it so it won't be dropping out. And I think most people get up to a year with one washer, so they're not that expensive. And some people swear by them. I haven't really used them a lot, but I do have them. Another thing I want to point out is this thread guide right here. you are actually able to use your, you're able to loosen this screw and move that toward that way or to the right or to the left. Ideally, the screw is supposed to be in the center, but if you get to the end and you're just still not getting the right tension, this is something you can play around with, is adjusting it to the left or to the right. So mine's just a little bit scooted. Let's see, scooted to the left. But like I said, ideally it should be in the center. So start out with that. Now the take-up spring. We want to talk about this take-up spring. You can see that there's a trench that this spring comes up out of. Let me move where the camera can show it. There's a little trench that this spring comes right up out of. So you can take your flathead screwdriver. You can do your flathead screwdriver. With this model 21, I'm not able to see the screw. I know some it sticks out, but mine I can't. But it is a flathead screwdriver that fits. So just to really know that your spring is where it needs to be set, you can turn this to the left. You can loosen it until this spring is not touching that top of that trench anymore. So you'll loosen it, and then you will slowly tighten it just until that spring is once again touching the top of that track. And then once it is, you tighten it just a little smidgen more, just a tiny little bit tighter once it touches that top of that track. So then you know that your spring is the right strength. Okay, the needle. You want to know that your needle is in the right place. So the needles have a front side and a back side. And the side that goes to the front is the little trench that the thread runs down, okay? And that's part of the difference in the different size needles is that track for the thread. So that's how you'll always know that your needle is facing front, is that track for the thread to run down in. I highly recommend a needle alignment magnet, because that will show you exactly where your eye is pointing. Whether you want your needle to point straight forward, or maybe you want it to be at 5:30. A lot of people do it to 5:30, but this can help you know that your needle is exactly where you want it. And it also makes it easy to make sure your needle is pushed all the way up, because you don't want it partly down. You want it pushed all the way up. If your needle is starting to make a popping sound on your fabric, you know you need to change your needle. If you've hit something, maybe you sewed across a pin, you probably need to change your needle. If you've quilted the equivalent of a king-size quilt, or you're starting a really important quilt, you certainly would want to have a new needle. Your needle size is important, and the manual that comes with your machine has a good page to show you which needle works with what thread. A size 16 needle is going to go with 60 or 50 weight thread. A size 18 needle is going to go with 40 weight. So those are just the really common thread weights right there. So most people use an 18. Okay, your quilt sandwich. You want to have it so that it's not super tight, but it's still got some give to it. So you don't want it super loose, but you don't want it super tight. So that's something to be aware of. I'm thankful that I have an idler rail, but if you don't have that idler rail, then another thing you've got to keep being aware of is this take-up rail. As the quilt builds up on the take-up rail, once it starts rubbing against the bottom part of your neck there, you're going to need to lift that take-up rail up. And because I've never had to do that, I don't have the right advice. I hear a finger width or something like that, but But anyway, that's just something to watch out for if you don't have that, to keep that lifted up as the quilt builds up on your take-up rail. The hopping foot, that needs to be correct. So you would go to your machine and you would lower your hopping foot so that this needle shaft is at its lowest spot. So once this bar gets to its lowest position, then at that point, that's when you would make sure that a credit card, this is sitting snugly on top of the credit card. And if it's not, then you would need to adjust both of these screws. And then again, you're able to go into your manual, and it shows the hopping foot, and it shows how you need to tighten, untighten, or loosen and retighten to make sure that your hopping foot is at the right distance off the needle plate. And you do that, without any fabric being in between. You just want it and your needle plate, and then you just slide that credit card. So if you are doing a quilt that's extra thick, maybe just thick material or a thick batting, and when you start to move it across, it creates drag. You can just feel it dragging. Then you're going to have to raise it up a little bit from what you normally would have. Okay, so back to the bobbin case tension. You will be turning that larger screw. You'll turn it right to tight, left to loose. You will lay the bobbin case flat in your hand and pull the threads. And it's going to be pulling from the top to the right. So you do that and pull it there, and then you just lay this and pull. There's a range of tightness, okay? I could probably loosen this screw and it barely lift, or I could tighten it so that it all but lifts off my hand. So you do have a range of tightness there. And so what I've been told is that the thinner threads like a little bit tighter bobbin, a little tighter tension, and your thick, more cottony threads like a looser tension. So as you're setting your screw for your bobbin, that's just something to be aware of, is where in that range of tightness that you pull on the thread and it lifts. Where do you have it? Do you have it so that it just barely lifts off your hand, which is your looser tension? Or do you have it so that it barely stays on your hand, which is the tighter tension? So like I said, for the cotton tension, you want the looser. For your thinner threads, your thin polyester threads, you want the tighter tension. So once you get your bobbin tension set, only then are you going to set this top tension. And you're going to turn it right to tight and left to loose. So something that I see recommended a lot, which I think is good advice, is to tighten this upper tension until you see the bobbin thread pulling up. And if you're able to use a different color thread that's going to be very obvious, like with this pink, if you were to use, say, a black bobbin and a red top thread, you could really tell what's happening with the thread. But over tighten this till you see your bobbin thread coming up, and then keep loosening it, and just a little bit at a time. Keep loosening it until you see that bobbin thread start to disappear. And even if you still barely see that bobbin thread, it's probably going to be okay, because once you take your quilt off your rails, then that thread is going to relax into your quilt. In the manual, there is a good page on thread tension that shows you your proper tension, where the bobbin thread and the top thread interlock in the center of your quilt sandwich. If you have too much tension, then if you have too much top tension, then you have your bobbin is showing on top. If you have too little top tension, then your top thread is going to show on the bottom. So, so this explains that and shows that. So this is nice to refer to. And then this is a very important paragraph down here on the bottom where it talks about that you do have that range of tightness in your bobbin. So if you had set your bobbin and you still can't get it to work by increasing and decreasing your top tension, then it may be time to just reset that bobbin screw and start all over again. Either make your bobbin tension be tighter or looser, but still lifting up on your hand, and then start again with the upper tension. It's good to have a test piece beside your actual quilt, using some of the scraps from your actual quilt. That's going to give you the same tension and the same fabric. So this is the great place to have to test and make sure of your threads. And every time that you change a bobbin, it's a really good thing to retest on that scrap out beside your quilt. If you sew over a pin or do something catastrophic like that, then it's very possible that you may mess up the timing in your machine. So if you've messed up your timing, then you're going to need to refer back to the YouTube videos. Qnique, the Grace Company, has a video for resetting the timing. It covers it in the manual. If it were me, I would probably call the Grace Company and let them talk me through it, just to be sure. So I hope that these tips have helped you get a little better tension.